This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 740, recorded on Wednesday, September 25th, 2019. Science and chemistry. Hey there, I'm Dr. Kiki, and today we're going to fill your heads with bad news, good news, and robots. But first,
TWIS is supported by listeners like you. We thank you for your support. We really couldn't do it without you.
Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. This world should not be led by children. The fact that this week the UN put on a young girl center stage to speak on climate change never should have happened. That 4 million children skip school to focus this world's attention on climate change never should have happened. And the constant stream of derision from some media platforms aimed at these children also never should have happened. What should have happened, and happened long ago, is for the adults of this world to take the lead on the climate crisis. But if we cannot find the adults willing to do the adulting, it is at very least nice to see that the next generation will take the responsibility seriously. But they cannot do it alone. They need your help. They need the adults of this world to become much more active. They need the adults of this world to become much more vocal. They need the adults of this world to fight for this world, because it's the only world we've got, and we owe it to them when we're done with it. That and another episode of This Week in Science coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science. What's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science.
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
and a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We are back again to talk about all the science that we found from the last week. And oh my goodness, it was a hot week this week. So hot, so hot. Today we have a wonderful episode ahead. I have some stories. Well, it is climate week, so we're going to talk about some climate stories. But I've got the bad news, I've got the good news, and then maybe I'll talk about other things like Crypt keeper wasps and your tea, because that sounds good. We also have an interview today. We will be talking about science and comics in just a few moments with our interview guest. Justin, what did you bring?
I've got prehistoric baby bottles, delicate disasters, and 2.5 million years of low carbon living.
Low carbon living. You're making it sound so good. And Blair, what is in the animal corner?
I have invasive toads. I have invasive fish and robots. And a story about your cat.
About my cat?
You
Yeah.
found out? Oh, I'm going to be in trouble.
Your
Yeah.
cat and your cat and your cat and your cat. You know, all of
Your
our
cat.
listeners' cats.
That's right. I can't wait to talk about that. You know how much I love the cats, and you know what kind of a conversation it always stirs up with Justin.
Yeah.
So let's jump into all the fun. Everyone, I would like to remind you that if you are not yet subscribed to This Week in Science, I just want to say you can do that if you want to. Why aren't you subscribed? Oh my goodness, get in there. You can find us all places podcasts are found. You can also find us on YouTube and Facebook. Look for This Week in Science. You can also find us at twis.org. All right, let's jump into our interview now. I would love to introduce our guest. C.A. Preece is his writing name. Christopher Preece is the writer of a chemistry graphic novel, CheMystery, high school chemistry teacher, and a STEM education PhD student. Welcome to the show, Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on. I would love to know, how did you get interested in chemistry specifically?
It it was sophomore year in high school, and I took chemistry for the first time, and I felt like it allowed me to explore and understand most of the things that I was curious about, like with the world around me. And while I was taking that class, I remember thinking, I think this is what I want to do for the rest of my life in some capacity. Yeah.
Did you have a really good teacher when you?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
her name was Miss Harmon. She is a godsend. Like, she's the sweetest woman ever. I love her to death. She was a great inspiration.
Does she know what she did for you? Have you talked to her about it since?
Oh, yes. I would, once I got to college, I would go back and visit her every year or so, and definitely let her know the influence that she had on me. And I ran into her last summer, actually, which I hadn't seen her since I published CheMystery. And so I got to talk to her about that. And, she was very excited for me and was very happy that that I was sort of like feeling her shoes in a way, because she's retired now. But it was a great interaction.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, there's always, I think there's, for so many people in the sciences, or, the thing that you end up passionate about, very often there's one person or there's somebody along the line who helped you find that spark, who helped you gain that curiosity. And so it's all, I mean, to be able to go back and be like, hey, you did that. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
How did you... Getting it, you got interested in chemistry, and then you started teaching. But how did you end up writing chemistry comics? How did that get started?
So I love comic books. I started reading comics. I think that was the first thing that I read was a comic book. My uncle was a comic artist for a while, and.
Wow.
So I was always around him drawing and doing things. And when I started teaching, I saw that my students were interested in superheroes. And so I started looking into, I wonder if there's any science comics out there that I could use. And I ran into the cartoon guide for chemistry, tried to use that, and quickly realized that it was not meant for people who are trying to learn chemistry. It's more meant for people who kind of already know it and maybe reviewing or whatever. And so there wasn't anything out there for me to use, really. So I figured, who better to make it than me? And so I started on this journey of writing science comics.
But the comics, I mean, there's the story, but they come with pictures. And I mean, did you start out drawing your own? Did you find somebody? Do you have a partner in crime? How did that all come together?
Yeah, so at first I was like, well, maybe I'll try to draw. And I would start sketching a little bit and found it extremely laborsome. And I get very frustrated when I can't get the image in my head on paper the way I want it to. And so it didn't take me long to be like, okay, I just need to save up money and find an artist. And I scoured the internet and was able to find Josh Reynolds, and had a wonderful working relationship with him with CheMystery. He did a lot of he did all the sequential art, and when it came to the really technical stuff, he was, he wanted to make sure he didn't mess any of it up. So he was like, I'm going to leave that to you. I'm going to, just draw it out as neatly as you can, and we're just going to put that on the page. And that's fine with me. I can handle the chemistry drawings, but don't ask me to draw people.
Right. The chemistry drawings are a little bit different than people and faces and hands and awkward poses. Other things. Yeah. So what kind of inspiration did you take when you started writing? How did you decide on a story? And, it's not just like, here's a picture and here's water, and this is how water is a good solvent, and there's a comic book. How did you put a story together, and where did you get your ideas?
So, again, the kids were really interested in superheroes, and so am I. Like, I love superheroes, and the more I started to dig into this and try to figure out how I wanted to write it and see what I was also interested in, I started to realize that most of the characters that I really like in comics are all science-based. And I never really thought about it too hard until I started writing the science comics. I'm like, wait a second, like Firestorm, Metamorpho, the Metalmen, the Atom, like all these characters are really science-based, and they're more often than not my favorites. And so, I definitely started reading more of those and trying to figure out how they integrated some science into their stuff, because they did have some science. I mean, there's certainly a lot of goofiness, pseudoscience, but as I looked at that for inspiration in terms of storytelling and trying to weave in superhero stuff. And then for the science, I tried to look at the educational comics, but a lot of the educational comics that I had read were kind of dull and boring. Like it was like reading a kind of like reading a textbook with just a comic book image there.
Right.
Yeah. I'm like, that's not how this is supposed to go. So I definitely had to try to weave it in as best I can and play with it. And, so it was definitely a big experiment for me in making the comic in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It sounds like it would be. So, CheMystery, mystery is it tells a little bit about the mystery at hand, right? So it's a mystery story. You say you took it from superheroes. So are there superheroes in the story, or is it more sleuthing and detective work that involves science?
No, it is definitely more superhero based. So the kids get into an accident in a very traditional comic book way. They get exposed to radiation, and instead of being burnt to a crisp, they end up endowed with superpowers. And from there they go off and fight a big radioactive monster and try to save a town from being powerless because they lost power from the radioactive monster attacking their energy source. And lots of cool things, like the superpower part. That's some hand waving. I don't really explain how their powers work, but I explain how their powers interact with the real science of the world.
Interesting. So as you were talking about this, a couple of things came to mind real quick. One is Once Upon a Time Life, which was this amazing BBC. It's sort of like the Schoolhouse Rock cartoons that we had in this country, but they had a whole series of them on biology. And for some weird contractual reason, they never have aired here, or they never aired via how BBC would normally put stuff over in America. But I've talked to a number of people who were truly inspired by this, morning cartoon that would walk them through the interactions of white blood cells and how the blood cell moves oxygen, and just went through the entire body with great accuracy. And then there was also some sci-fi that I had recently listened to from like the 40s or 30s, where it was a radio show. And they were talking about the area that they used to be under a big ice pack. I mean, they're talking about the history of glacialization as sort of the backdrop to this story. So just getting that hard science stuff in there goes a long way. You don't have to be doing, like you're saying, the lecture with a cartoon that's like happy about the textbook to get these concepts across. But it does draw them in more if you make it part of a storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I've dug more into science comics, I found a PSA from General Electric from like in the 1940s, where they were talking about nuclear power, because they, previously people had only heard about nuclear power from the bombs in World War II, and now that the country's trying to use it as a normal power source, and they're putting these nuclear power plants near people's houses. People are very concerned, and they just think, oh, they're going to kill us. So they put these comics out to educate people. And so, science and comics goes back a long way, but, it's like a blip 1 year and then gone for a long time. And there hasn't been like this sustaining force with science comics. But yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's the difference between science comics that are meant to educate. They tell a story, but the point is to actually get real information across versus science in comics. Do you have any thoughts on kind of like, you said, part of your story, it's a little hand waving, there's no like how the radiation made their special powers happen. And lots of comic books incorporate, it's just kind of like, the science behind how Spider-Man is able to like jump between buildings and not have his shoulder ripped from his arm at the end of, when he gets to the end of his swing, the physics don't quite work or add up. So, there's a little bit of, the superhero aspect where you allow a little flexibility. How much, when you're thinking about writing your story, like, do you start thinking about, okay, this, I'm cool with it not being explained, and I think people will allow this to be a little bit of suspension of disbelief versus like everything has to be accurate?
Yeah, so I knew, certainly doing superheroes, that not everything could be accurate. And when thinking about that in the story, I think I allowed myself to have like normal superhero powers that we've come to accept being just as part of the superhero genre, like flight and energy beams and that sort of thing, being okay. But anything that I explicitly explained the science of within the comic, that had to be accurate. So if you start, if you really start digging beyond the part that the parts that I'm explaining, like at one point the kids get knocked into space, and I show their atoms being energized, like they're absorbing sun's radiation, and the electrons in some of their atoms are becoming excited, and I actually show the transition of these electrons, jumping from one energy level to another, and then when they come back down, they're ready to fight the radioactive monster, and they're more energized and they're more powerful, and they're able to really give the radioactive monster a run for its money. I wanted to show those transitions and in that sort of fantastical way, because it allows it to be a little bit more fun than just talking about some mundane thing. And there are pieces of science, well, with any topic in science, there are amazing, almost fantastical things. It's like, I can't believe that's the way that actually works. But to try to weave so many different topics with a story just using real life examples would make it very, very difficult.
Yeah, it seems like it would. I'm trying to imagine, like, just if somebody came from the future, or the only thing that's left as a record of our educational system are these science comics in the future. What would a future archaeologist looking at these science comics
that's
think about our educational system?
No, what's really interesting, there'd be enough hard science in it to be like, okay, all of this is checking out.
Right.
People of the past could fly. That part. Everything else is right. They got it all right, but they never explain how they flew. Wow. It would be really intriguing mix.
I like your answer.
Well, so this is okay, and this is a side sort of thing, but I've often thought that there's not a whole lot of science in ancient texts that people take very seriously still today. to put it sort of right. But if there was stuff that just we weren't going to encounter for several hundred or several thousand years, you go, well, maybe there is a little something to, because there's all of these hard facts that they weren't even using back then. They didn't have any capacity to create the technology that would have derived from this, but they knew these insanely complicated scientific things, but none of it's there. So, but this would lead credence to the future archaeologists going, there's got to be some truth to it. All the rest of this checks out.
There's got to be something.
Somebody was flying somewhere. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Or on the other hand, it's be like, I didn't realize flight was developed that early. I thought, okay, it's older than we thought. Yeah. We've been doing it for years in the future. You walked places under your feet? That's so gross.
What are these school buses? Like, what's that? Why are we herding mass people in this big yellow Twinkie on wheels?
Terrible stories. When we're thinking about the good, I guess when you think about like the good and the bad of how science is portrayed in popular comic books, since you like popular comics and got your inspiration from them, can you think of any examples where you'd be like, oh my God, that is just the worst? Like, it's just the worst example of science in a comic book versus like, this is like the pinnacle of the best.
So when I really started to dig into this, I made a website, atomicuniverse.org, and started to review different comics and the science in them. And there's one superhero, Metamorpho, who is the Element Man. He's able to somehow turn his body into any element. And sometimes the writer would try to use Metamorpho's powers in a way that was just wrong. Like, he would have them turn into an element to do something that it wouldn't be able to do. And there's definitely a lot of that sort of thing, where some fact checking could have gone a long way. I was actually able to contribute to some science to one comic as a consultant and it's a Dr. Solar series. I forgot what company was putting it out. I think Dynamite at the time. And so the writer would send me some questions, and I would try to work out some more accurate science for him to put into the story. But there was still a lot of hand waving with the science, the superhero powers and all that. But he was trying to get it right and was asking me questions, and I was able to help him out a little bit. And there's a comic writer, Mark Wade, who has a physics background. I think he had a minor in physics,
if
I remember.
Cool.
Yeah, and he actually wrote a Justice League story in the 90s that was kind of mirroring or was a metaphor for quantum entanglement, which was really cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of bad, but there's also some good. There's some good nuggets in there that you can find here and there.
I always think Star Trek gets too much credit because they never explain anything, but they'll put a scientific name to something. It's like, oh, that's the Heisenberg uncertainty compensator that we're working on there. We're going to use a graviton beam to investigate. They would throw out these things that have some scientific reference that they're making that might be slightly hard to, but it doesn't go any, doesn't explain anything. It's just sort of, it's a hand wave of its own. Yeah.
Right. They'll just come up with this elaborate name that sort of try to guide you in a certain thought direction and
right.
and leave it at that.
Yep.
Yeah.
You should be thinking these things now.
Oh yeah,
Weird.
and there's a lot of that. Like this is the quantum portal gun or whatever, and they'll just that'll be all that they ever say about it.
Oh yeah, 8 years ago there was a quantum everything.
Oh yeah.
Actually, I've lost a lot of money. I invested in a company that was making quantum juice. You can make a home. Yeah, I shouldn't have invested. I was like, oh, quantum juice. I didn't realize it gotten to that point where you can have.
Oh my goodness. Nope.
Stay hydrated.
Nothing like a nice
still
cup
have-
of quantum juice in the morning.
still have
Nothing like a
several hundred-
collapsed wave function of juice.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing.
Really
Until
gives
you
me my
open
get
it-
up and go.
It takes
Until you
like a
open it,
particle
you
and a
don't-
wave.
Yeah, that's
Until
right.
until you put the straw in, you can't tell what flavor it is.
Ah, there you go.
Schrodinger's juice. So tell us anything. Is there anything else that you want to tell us about this book? So you've got a Kickstarter that's coming up for your chemistry comic book. Can you tell us a bit about what you're trying to do with that?
Yeah. So October 1st, I'll be starting a Kickstarter, and it will be for a science comic that is Fire, Salt, Slime. So these are 3 different comics that I'm putting together that I've written. And the focus of these is more grounded in showing kids how to be curious and how to explore their curiosity. Because like I'm teaching and I'm trying to get them to look at the world around them and just be curious and investigate. And I have like this year-long research project that I have all of my students do. And, and I continuously question them of like, okay, what do you want to do? What are you interested in? All right, you're going to focus on this thing. Let's learn how to set up that experiment and conduct it. And the kids are very frequently reluctant to really take that step forward and actually investigate. And I see this not only in that project, but when we're doing labs in class, it's like, okay, you have these materials. Try to figure out how to do this thing. And I'm going to give you some time to play around and see what's going on, see how you could try to put these pieces together, how these things could interact. And, they'll sometimes, or many of them will kind of look at the stuff, talk to their lab partner a little bit, and not get started. So I've written these comics to be very much more of a model to them, to model for them like how to be curious or how to explore their curiosity. Because I know they have some curiosity, whether they're thinking about it explicitly or not, they do. And so Fire, Salt, Slime is definitely meant to target that curiosity bit and allow them to, or show them how to explore it, and also to learn some content with fire, salt, and having some fun making slime. Yeah.
Because all kids need to make slime. It's
Absolutely.
It's a rite of passage, I think. By the time you leave high school, you must know how to make a gallon of slime.
And that's a very valuable thing that you're trying to teach there. We get when we get too much into the rote system of teaching kids to remember and then regurgitate some facts, we take away that level of curiosity that should be involved and going out and discovering a thing on their own. And that is a much more useful trait. Especially now that we have Google, and can have just look stuff up on a phone. You know what? The whole remembering and regurgitating might not be as important as creating critical thinkers for the future.
Yeah, and that's all what the next generation science standards are all about, which is so cool, is about instead of testing to knowledge, testing to process and reasoning, and giving a problem and spending a semester or a school year solving a problem and kind of framing science around that, which I think is really beneficial also to make it more engaging and fun and interesting, and something that students might want to pursue instead of something that seems very dry and difficult, right? And so I do think it's also part of this idea of injecting science into other ways of life. Science informs everything that we do all day. And the more we can take that out of the silo, the better.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So this is October 1st that the Kickstarter is going to get going. And how much are you trying to raise? And so this Fire, Salt, Slime, it's one comic book that you're funding? Okay.
Yeah, so the goal is going to be $6,000. That's going to allow me to print about 1,000 books, and it's going to also allow me to. I'm going to be giving like 10 classroom sets of the comic to various different schools as part of it, and a lot of those schools are in Kentucky because that's most of my connections and the people I know, and. Most of them are Title I schools, so the population that they serve is very socioeconomically challenged, and there's also going to be 2 rewards left, or that I put in that teachers could win to get a free classroom set.
That's great. So you're trying to get more of these into classrooms so that the kids have them available, so that it's a supplement to what teachers are trying to get kids to learn.
Yeah, and targeting like the kids who get lower grades or middle grades is something I've been trying to do as well, because I've been doing a lot of research on how comics affect or can be used in the classroom and what kind of population they're affecting, and it's come up continuously in the little bit of research that there is out there on using science comics, that the lower and middle achieving students perform a lot better with reading the comics as opposed to using some other something else like a textbook or even an infographic.
I wonder if is there any data on whether that's is it just because the images, like it's just something that is more interesting to them, so their attention is on it longer, or is there a particular aspect of that graphic context that makes a difference?
That's I'm definitely going to be digging into more of this as I work on writing my research proposal and conducting my own research. But there's multimedia learning principles that look into how students learn through all sorts of different aspects of videos and text. So like more simplistic artwork, rather than using an actual picture of a heart, using more of a cartoonish picture of a heart.
Oh, please. Yes. Who wants to stare at a real heart? It's so disgusting.
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah. Okay. It's too gross. But can you imagine the Valentines if they just had the picture of an aorta? It's like, there you go. I don't want that.
No, it's gross, and like I don't know, biology and getting into all that living stuff. Give me a chemical and a dry lab or a wet lab.
Yeah.
Give me the squishy things any day. Squishy, bleedy things. There we go.
But I'm very much more of a visual learner and trying. I remember looking at the biology textbooks and stuff and trying to look at that to do a dissection. And it was very hard to tell where they were wanting me to look. I'm like, this looks all messy. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. But for comics, when they break it down and it's much more clean cut, like I know what I'm supposed to be looking at. It's highlighted there for me visually, and so a lot of it has to do with that sort of highlighting effect, whether it be visually or in written form. And there's quite a bit of the research that backs up the conversational aspect of comics, and that triggers some remembering. And how our brains learn through conversation, and that is triggered from the word balloons and not necessarily triggered through just reading text.
That's really interesting. I think it's fascinating how our brains respond. And I mean, maybe the higher achieving students are just going to, achieve higher no matter what. They're going to read whatever they're given. They're going to do whatever work they're given. And that's the way it is. But if you can do something that's going to get a student to achieve better than they would otherwise, because it captures their attention, it captures and they're able to engage with that information, it shouldn't matter how that information is presented.
Yeah, it plants a seed. This is something I've always thought of doing, is taking little portraits of Einstein as an example, and burying them in sandboxes. So some kid finds this at age 5 or 6 and goes, "Look what I found!" And mom's like, "What do you got there?" "Oh, that's Einstein." "What? Who's that?" "Well, this is a scientist that did it." But no, seriously, and then at some point in the 8th grade, they're talking about physics maybe for the first time, and they're going to talk about Einstein, and the kid's like, "Oh, I know that guy. I don't know how, but I'm really interested." Or maybe I remember, I still have that picture, and I went anything that plants that sort of seed. So when they go forward, it's not that foreign to them. I mean, if it turned out, that general relativity was created by Bert from Bert and Ernie, a lot of kids would be like, "Oh, I know that guy. Now I want to learn all about this work he did," aside from the fact that it was entertaining before. Just plant that seed that builds that interest, that when kids grow up, they see it again. There's a feeling of familiarity and not an off-putting. It's because there's a lot of weird words in science that can throw people off just in pronouncing them on day one. Get that hurdle out of the way. Get the basic concepts out of the way. Anyway, yeah.
I would like to see Big Bird come up with the theory of relativity and see how that goes.
That would be great. Sesame Street does general relativity.
That would be good. Yeah.
And then you have the Grouch popping out of the trash can occasionally, getting all cranky about Higgs boson.
What about black holes? Yeah, pops back in and out of his gut. That's basically what that garbage can is. It's a black hole, right?
It's a black hole, right?
It only takes up this much space, but there's elephants down there, and there's a pool, and there's all kinds of there's a whole bunch.
And then you have Schrodinger's snuffleupagus. Is he real or not?
Right?
I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
We could start writing this right now.
I know. Sesame Street, we're coming for you.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Chris, do you have a link for the Kickstarter yet, or is that something that will come on October 1st when the Kickstarter starts?
Yeah, that will come October 1st when I start it. Yeah.
Okay, so we can link to your website, Atomic Universe, on our website to help you out there, to remind people. But definitely send me a tweet to let me know so I can share with our audience on October 1st so that they can keep in touch with you and maybe help you with this Kickstarter, because this sounds like a great idea.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. I definitely will.
Fantastic. Is there anything else that you want people to know about CheMystery Comics, your Kickstarter, before we go?
I don't know. Love them, and I'm gonna keep making them and keep researching them and find the best way I can to put science content in front of students for them to learn.
Nice.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you for doing what you're doing, and
Absolutely.
thank you for joining us tonight on this show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. And like I said, I will have links on our website for you to find if you're interested in more information about CheMystery, the Fire, Salt, and Slime by C.A. Preece. We're going to take a short break right now and come back in a few more moments with all sorts of science with This Week in Science. Stay tuned. Thank you. Yes, thank you for joining us for this episode of This Week in Science. I am so glad that you are here with me, and I do hope that you will listen for a couple of moments as I tell you about ways that you can support This Week in Science. That's right. We are listener supported. If you've noticed, there's no advertisements on this show. We are completely listener supported. And so that means if you like the show, we could really use your help keeping it going. Anything that you're able to give is fantastic. So we have links on our website, TWIS.org. We do for dun dun dun. You know what we love? The new TWIS calendar. Ooh, let's make sure I can get it there. That's right. We are now open for pre-orders for the new TWIS calendar. So if you have seen Blair's Animal Corner calendars in the past, now is the time to get your pre-orders in. Go to twis.org and you will be able to click on the pre-order link, the picture of a wonderful frog. There's a beautiful stained glass image of the cover of the Blair's Animal Corner calendar for 2020. That's right. Get your pre-orders in now so that we can send them to you for the holidays. It'll be fantastic. Yes, twis.org. While you're at twis.org, checking out and getting your calendar pre-orders in, you can also subscribe to TWIS. That's right. You can click on the orange button to be able to subscribe to TWIS. You can click on our Zazzle store link. If you'd like to find other TWIS merchandise, over at the Zazzle store link, there are products with images from past Blair's Animal Corner calendars. So you can head on over to Zazzle.com, get yourself mugs, t-shirts, hats, tote bags, other lovely things with images from TWIS and also from the calendars of past years. Additionally, you can click on the Patreon link. That Patreon link will take you to our Patreon website, which is a crowdfunding website for artists and creators, podcasters like us. You can click on that Patreon link and choose your amount of support. How much will you support us each month? If you support us at $10 or more a month, that level and above will get you thanked at the end of the show by name. Anything above $10 will get you thanked by the end by name. Starting October 1st, it looks like we're starting something October 1st also. Anyone who subscribes or is subscribed already at the $50 a month level will get a framed piece of art from Blair's calendar, the original artwork. That's right. So the $50 level normally gets a piece of artwork, but this year that piece of artwork will be framed. So for 3 months, if you support us at that $50 level, starting on October 1st, we will send you a framed piece of art that will be on Patreon, and that's starting October 1st. I hope to see you join that $50 level for a little while. It will help us to be able to raise the money we need to get Blair a new computer. That's right. We're splitting the cost there. And some of you have already sent in some donations there. Thank you very much for your support. And we do appreciate that. And we're going to get Blair a new computer. It's very exciting stuff. Okay. All right. All the things. If you've seen it, there Blair's showing off some uncolored artwork. It still needs to be made pretty for the calendar. It's still in process. Blair, are you going to be done in time for 2020? Yes?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, good.
I just finished 2 more pieces today before the show started. So it should not be a problem at all. This thing should be in production definitely by the end of October, which will give us plenty of time to make sure that it all gets to all of you by the holidays.
Yes. All right. Everyone, thank you so much. If you haven't told anyone about TWIS, don't keep it a secret. Tell someone about TWIS today. Thank you for your support. We really could not do any of this without you.
And we're back with more This Week in Science.
Oh, yes, we are. And it is time for This Week in What Has Science Done For Me lately? Yay! What has science done? What has it done? This week we have a letter from. It's a long letter. Let me see if I can get down to the. I've got to move my screen around. Or maybe I should just read it off of the other screen where I can actually read it. Maybe that's a good idea. Here we go. All right, we have a letter from Fernando. Fernando this week writes in, what has science done for me lately? Today I went to the store to buy a very ubiquitous item in the Western diet. It is an off-white, nutrient-rich liquid that goes well with cereal. Just your typical purchase. Nonetheless, it made me realize how much we owe to nutrition and food sciences. Because the product I bought was soy milk. Fernando, you mean soy juice. Anyway, this year,
soy milk.
I became a vegetarian, mostly for environmental reasons.
Yay!
And without science, I would not be able to keep my body functioning properly. I would most likely suffer from weakness and muscle loss from the acute lack of protein. I would have had severe vitamin B12 deficiency, critically low iron, magnesium, and zinc levels in my blood, not to mention the brittleness of my bones due to an inability to absorb or fixate calcium. Today, it's well known that a plant-based diet can avoid all these shortcomings and provide a healthy source of all the necessary nutrients. But of course, we understand this only because of all the knowledge that we have accrued over the course of history, such as identification of nutritious species from poisonous ones. That's a big one. Don't eat poisonous mushrooms, kids.
There's a lot of trial and error that went into that, by the way.
Yes. Domestication of crops, development of food preservation, industrial large-scale production, standardization of acetic conditions, enrichment and fortification, determination of nutritional content, genetic engineering, and molecular enhancement. And that's not even all of it. All these advances and many more allow me to make better choices about what to use to fuel my body while considering the impact that my decisions have in our planet. And this happens 3 times a day. Science is what makes a balanced, plant-based, sustainable diet possible. And who knows? If this trend continues, maybe science will develop even better and more efficient ways of putting food on our plates with an even smaller ecological footprint. For now, I'm happy cutting back on my consumption of animal products. It's an almost insignificant price to pay compared to all the discoveries and technological leaps that have had to occur to reach this point, and it is all well worth it. I love the show, and I'll be forever aghast by your diligence, passion, and commitment. Thank you so much for bringing to my life reasons to be joyful, hopeful, and motivated to keep participating on this joint effort that is science. Your number 1 Mexican minion, Fernando.
Oh,
Thank you, Fernando.
Fernando.
That was beautiful.
Thank you so much, Fernando. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for listening to TWIS. Thank you for bringing us into your life every week. And thank you for writing and food science, nutritional science. There is so much that we take for granted every time we go to the grocery store, every time we open our refrigerators, go to a restaurant.
It's
There's
that whole
so much.
no GMOs for me, thanks. The thing is, your grocery cart would be pretty empty. Is the thing.
And it's a good point too that we have not felt the result of the imminent mass starvation that was going to take place for a population much smaller than the world has today. After things like canning and freezing and transportation, food science took up the challenge and warded that off. So people may not realize that there was a massive, horrible thing heading the planet's way that food science took care of in labs across the world, and we never saw the consequences of it. But it's hard work keeping many of us on the planet at once and alive.
And it's going to get harder.
Yeah, there's more that work needs to be done. Absolutely.
There's always more humans.
Yeah. More people, more food needings. If you would like to write in with a What Has Science Done for You Lately story, thought, song, sonnet, some words, please send me an email, Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, or a message on Facebook. Will do. Justin, wait, no.
No.
Yeah,
it's your turn.
Yeah.
I'm doing the normal.
This is the guest rundown.
It's the guest rundown. We had a guest, so I'll start with the news then. Let's start with the bad news. This today. Yeah, this week, bad news. Yeah. We all know I hope you realize it's Climate Week, which means there is a United Nations General Assembly, and they're talking a lot about climate. And a report came out from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. These are scientists who are bringing together an analysis of the most current research, all of the research to date on climate change. And it pretty much said we need to get a move on. Things are not good. If we do not get nations to agree to reducing their carbon dioxide emissions, we will most likely experience extreme warming above pre-industrial levels, which apparently, according to some news, we've never had these kinds of carbon dioxide levels or temperatures associated with them in human history.
Yeah, that's. Did you bring that story too? Because I got that one.
No, that's just. I'm just making. I'm not talking about it. I'm just referencing it. You can talk about it.
The entire evolution of modern humans took place in a low carbon environment. So we're tweaking dials that we got no idea what the effects. Well, we actually have a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
There's still unseen effects to come.
Many unseen effects to come, and the new special report on the ocean and cryosphere in a changing climate is available from the IPCC, and it stresses that the oceans are stressed, that things are moving a lot faster in the oceans than we thought they were. And one of the big problems, as we have talked about on this show before, is the potential for oxygen level declines. The ocean is already starting to deoxygenate. Its oxygen levels are reducing. And so this is the bad news. The bad news is that we really need to get started. The good news.
Can I stay on the bad news just for a second?
You want to stay on the bad news? Okay, we're going to just get the bad news out of the way. Okay, so let's do that. Okay.
So the girl who was speaking before the UN,
Greta Thunberg,
is about the age of this show.
16.
Yeah. And actually, where the show itself is a little older. But we've been talking about global warming since the inception of this show.
Yep.
This is not the get the move on as the conclusion is kind of irritating because the move should have been on a long time ago. And the idea that we need to get the move on is not dire or assertive enough of a statement. We have to enact retroactively things we should have already been doing.
Well, and I think the big difference, to kind of segue into the potential good news that Kiki might have, is that in the short amount of time that I have been working in environmental education, which for my age is longer than the average person my age, but still has not been that long, I have seen a huge difference in the way people talk about this. It is not and also, have you heard about this climate change thing? We have other worries. Then there's also climate change. Yeah, but there's so many other stuff going on. This is becoming a priority issue. This is becoming a thing that people talk about everywhere, at the dinner table, at school. And so I think that is really the big shift that we are seeing right now, even just in the past couple of years, that has a huge potential to completely change the way the world responds to this issue. And so I think what you're getting at, Justin, is totally right, is that we've known about it for a long time, and it's been time to start for a long time. But I think where we're at right now is it is time to make it the number one priority.
And I do have to say that for years, scientists have been talking about it. We've been talking about it. media outlets have been paying it some service through the years, but it hasn't gotten the media attention that it has needed. Now, I'm going to say thank you to Greta Thunberg for becoming a story that the media wants to tell. And it has put her in the spotlight and made her a spokesperson. And she is stepping up to the plate and going with it because this is something that she's betting her future on. But it is the story of so many children who look at the future and are afraid. And they don't know where it's going to go. And they're having dinner table conversations with their parents, maybe about the fact that North America has 3 billion fewer birds than it did in 1970 because birds are decreasing. Hey, birders, your passion is dying.
Is that why every bird on my little app is now rare? When you do bird sighting, it tells you like
they're all rare now. That's right.
So,
yes.
Okay, that explains it. I'm like, there's a lot of rare birds in this area. It's only recently that they became so.
Yeah, researchers from Cornell University documented hundreds of species of birds, populations of 529 species. They used long-term bird monitoring databases, and they found that the number of individual birds across all the species decreased by 29% from around 10 billion in 1970 to just over 7 billion in 2017. And so on its own, okay, that's a big decrease. But then we start talking about the decrease in insects. We start talking about the decrease that other plant species that are dying. There are many things that are changing in the world. So let's talk about some of the good things.
I was just going to say, I wonder if those are correlated with the use of insecticides.
Yeah.
And the increase in, I wonder if there's a correlation between the decrease in birds and the increase in cats.
There you go. I knew it was going to come in some point. I knew it was going to. But I'm not going to argue with you on that. I will say if you're a cat owner.
Oh no, it's the hour.
If you're a cat owner,
get rid of your cats. That's what she was going to say.
No, I can answer. I can finish it. Hold on. If you're a cat owner, and Kiki's still muted, keep it out, keep it inside, or put it on a leash.
Yeah, really. Indoor cats, it's your responsibility to prevent them from decreasing the birds
any further,
and contracting and being a vector for toxoplasmosis.
Right. So let's move into the good news, right? Okay. Good news about the climate. I want, we've talked on the show many times about the bad news makes people feel hopeless. Like there's nothing we can do, right? What can I do? Who am I? I'm just one person. Well, you are just one person, but you can have a role, and it helps to think about things that are positive that are happening around you. So, for instance, just today, a company named Intuit, who is behind QuickBooks and other software, TurboTax, you might be familiar with, very popular software company, they have partnered with Project Drawdown to make a promise to what they say is become climate positive 50 times by 30. And this target means that they are going to try to surpass carbon neutrality. So while most companies and government and institutions are maybe trying to become carbon neutral, they say that they, through conversations, have become very aware of the ramping up of climate change that is occurring, and that they are going to make an effort by 2030 to reduce their carbon emissions by 50 times greater than its current carbon footprint. So they're going to, they're making a promise, and this is something that they've talked with the employees. The company feels that this is something that they need to do, and they are signing on to the United Nations Global Compact. So they are making a promise that they're going to do this. And so this is one place where industry where you, as maybe an employee, maybe you can start talking to people. Maybe you're a business owner. Maybe you can start having conversations with the business community you're in, with the company you work for, about ways that your company can not only move toward carbon neutrality, but even go beyond that. And it's really exciting to see a group like Intuit making that kind of pledge. And beyond that, Project Drawdown has also started a new organization underneath its umbrella, which is called Drawdown Labs. And the whole purpose of Drawdown Labs is to work with organizations to help them develop their strategies for reaching these targets, so that these companies aren't doing it on their own, but actually have help from within the industry. Other good news, Greta Thunberg is a spokesperson, and there's a story being told. I love that. And if you haven't seen her speech to the UN General Assembly, we'll have a link to it on our webpage. Costa Rica has been named as the world's champion of the earth. That is the UN's highest environmental honor for everything that Costa Rica is doing. Costa Rica had decades of deforestation. More than 50% of the trees in Costa Rica have been restored through efforts within the country. 70% of all buses and taxis are expected to be electric in about 10 years, by 2030. Full electrification projected for 2050. The country is trying to achieve net zero by 2050. Wow. They are going to reform transportation, energy, waste, and land use.
Nice.
So that it can deal with it. This is a small country with only about 0.4% of global emissions, but this is the kind of leadership and inspiration that so many other countries can take. This is a country that realized it can create a template for others to follow. And so Costa Rica.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Let's more countries be like Costa Rica. And then there have been questions about whether or not we can phase out fossil fuels. There's this argument because fossil fuels, when you burn them, they're dirty and they put sulfur dioxide and other aerosols that are reflective in the atmosphere. And those reflectant aerosols reflect sunlight and they do contribute to global cooling. And there's been this argument, we can't quickly phase out fossil fuels because if we do, we'll warm up faster.
Oh, I have one. Ice also reflects sunlight. Yeah. So when you melt the ice caps, that also reduces the albedo.
Right. But with it, not talking about the ice, but if we, we reduce fossil fuels, all of those sulfates end up out of the atmosphere. No more reflective cooling effect. So global warming happens faster. The ice caps start melting faster. None of this is good, right? So you'd go, hey, maybe we shouldn't reduce our fossil fuels as quickly. Well, scientists decided to look at this with data and a simulation. They created a model to actually model various effects of sulfates in the atmosphere and reductions in fossil fuels and how things would turn out. The models say that it's really not because we aren't going to be able to realistically dramatically drop our fossil fuel use globally in fast enough to offset those aerosols. This argument doesn't hold water. And also and the second point is, we have been globally instituting clean air policies and regulations that reduce sulfates in the air already. So we've already started the aerosol reduction. So let's just get rid of the fossil fuels, people. There's no argument against it.
This is sounding very much like the smoke a cigarette, it's good for your lungs kind of thing. Like, no, but you want that junk in the atmosphere. It's good for you. So, jeez. All right.
Yeah.
whatever.
I mean, I've heard this argument before, and I've just kind of been like, "What? Why wouldn't we want?" No. So now, honestly, there's some scientific research modeling these scenarios with and without sulfate molecules, drop in aerosols to see how they would turn out. And this is published in Nature, and the researchers just say we should just move forward. Research says, let's
You're
start
wrong.
decreasing the fossil fuels, folks.
We need this to be more like the World War II war effort. You know, where
everyone mobilizes. Yeah.
everybody across the country was called into action. Look, if you have an old bed frame in your garage, we need the metal. We need the metal from that. If you have a candy turning device and it's made out of brass, we need that brass. We need everybody to go through the garage, through their belongings, take anything that's got metal in it, and allow us to recycle it into the mobilization and the war effort. We need something like this. If you have a combustion engine, be it a lawnmower, a generator, or a vehicle that is old and could be replaced with an electric vehicle, turn it in for the effort. I mean, we really are at that point, and we wouldn't be at this point if again we had reacted long ago.
So to that point,
we
Justin,
didn't, so
actually,
let's
I heard a little last bit of hope before we move on. I heard Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, today on an interview where he said he plans to turn the 600,000 electric cars in California to 5 million within, oh gosh, I think he said by 2030 or something like
10
that.
years,
which
let's
would
do it.
absolutely mean you would have to do a trade-in on combustion engine vehicles. And so I think it's that sort of...
It's the only way.
Ultimately, you need government involved in order to do that sort of thing. And that is the really big difference, right? Is that science was staying out of politics for so long. It didn't seem like the place for it. And now we are recognizing it, specifically with this issue and some others, you have to mix them. Yeah. You have to figure it out.
And we did this under the Obama administration when we had a physicist as the head of the Department of Energy. Where there was a determination that one of the ways that we
Stephen Chu, right?
Yes. One of the ways that we could increase fuel efficiency dramatically and very quickly was what ended up being the cash for clunkers thing, where people could turn in vehicles that had poor fuel mileage and get a voucher towards greater than the value of the vehicle towards a new vehicle that had higher emission standards. So these are the sorts of things that, that's still combustion to a combustion, but it, dramatic improvement in nationwide fuel economy. We need this sort of thing. The attempts, by the way, this is for people who are listening who have been hearing that the emission standards are going to get rolled back by the current administration. The market of the auto industry wants to sell in California first, and the rest of the nation a little bit too. But it's such a big state that if the argument is being made here against the deregulation, no manufacturer is going to go along with it. They're going to continue to listen to California, because another administration or something else that's going to change, and then they don't have the vehicles that are ready for California would ruin them. So California and Gavin Newsom, as you're saying, proposing to increase the amount of electric vehicles and the rebates that the state gives to people who buy electric vehicles. There is this level of government involvement in the war effort on the vehicle front in California, and on a lot of other fronts in California too, energy-wise. It's not dramatic enough, but it has already begun. It's already taking place.
And the battery technology for electric vehicles is going to continue improving. Tesla has reported that they are developing a 1,000,000-mile battery. So the battery...
Okay.
I mean, the battery itself will last 1,000,000 miles, it will.
The charge? I thought you were saying
the charge will last.
There's no trunk. There's room for one passenger.
That's right.
And it's the size of a minivan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It weighs 1 million pounds.
But the longevity of the batteries matters. How long you can go before you have to replace the batteries, especially, these batteries need to be recycled and taken care of. We need to take care of that technology also, because these metals are important.
There are companies that specifically recycle hybrid batteries and do this sort of thing. I mean, that infrastructure is becoming in place. And then the fears of the price of these batteries is kind of overblown because of that. Because initially, I was in the auto industry, so when the Preece came out, and everybody's like, it's $10,000 to replace the battery on this thing. Which was true for like the first one that they made was actually like $1.5 million, or maybe $4 or $5 million to replace the first one. By the time there was 600,000 of these things on the road, the price was like $2,500. Now at this point, it's like 600, and I think the people who recycle it might be competing for for you having to actually pay for that. They want it as bad as you're going to want the new one at the price point. So it's getting to the point where it's not really that big of a deal.
Yeah. It's all getting better. Hey, Justin, now that we've got all these positive stories about things that are happening, do you have any science for me that you want to tell me about?
As though I would then bring you something not positive. Okay, so this is actually my favorite story in a lot of ways. Because it has to do with babies. And babies are awesome. This is a team of scientists led by the University of Bristol. They have found evidence that prehistoric babies were fed animal milk using the equivalent of a modern day baby bottle.
Aww.
Yeah, they had these possible infant feeding vessels were made from clay. They first appear in Europe in the Neolithic, about 5,000 years BC, so that's 7,000-ish years ago. They became then increasingly more commonplace throughout the Bronze and Iron Ages. The vessels were usually small enough to fit within a baby's hand and have a little spout through which the liquid inside can be suckled out. And sometimes, and this is my favorite part, they have feet and are shaped like imaginary animals.
Oh.
So cute. Like, I want one of these baby bottles now. This is researchers, but what they want to investigate, in fact, if these were actual infant feeding vessels versus something that might have been given to sick people or might have been just like, I don't know, a small cup to suckle out of in the old days. So they used a combined chemical and isotopic approach to identify and quantify the food residues found within the vessels. Their findings, published in the journal Nature, showed that the bottles contained ruminant milk from domesticated cattle, sheep, goats.
Oh, they're so cute. Oh my gosh, if you're listening to the show, please go to TWIS.org and look at the article, because they really are little clay animals with feet.
Yeah.
They have little feet and little heads and horns.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, they're adorable.
So if you get baby bottles today, or the sippy cups, as if you get more towards the infant age, you will see animals on cups, because kids like animals.
Yeah.
Every kid loves animals. This is just a thing that kids do, and they like milk. And if it's even the animal that the milk comes out of, it's even better, because then you're teaching something. But yeah, so we're not as different as we may have thought at some point than people 7,000 years ago in our childhood.
So when I was in New Orleans, I went to the Museum of Pharmacy, which was this amazing little museum that had a bunch of weird, like, Victorian era and other kind of pretty old medical devices in it. And they had a whole display of baby bottles, and none of them looked like that. They all looked kind of more reminiscent of modern day bottles. They had some sort of rubber nipple or something akin to that on it. But none of them looked like this. Actually, they clearly had more issues to them than this. So one of them was what later became called the murder bottle, which was so interesting because it was this bottle that would stand up on its own and had a long rubber hose that attached to a rubber nipple. So you could feed your baby and like walk away. Like you would just hand them the nipple. But the problem is it was so hard to clean that it would hold bacteria. And so at one point, I just looked it up because I thought I was wrong, but 2 out of 10 babies would survive.
Oh my God.
On a murder bottle. So they didn't last super long. But that seems like a way rudimentary design compared to this. This makes complete sense. It's gravity fed. And it also seems like it'd be easier to clean. But it's very interesting that there were all these other kind of funny shaped bottles that did not have this basic design that seems so common sense and like it would work super well.
Handheld, and then you also look at the attraction element of making it in the shape of an animal.
Yeah,
makes it so the child will be more likely to interact with it, become more attached to it, and it becomes a very friendly object that encourages them in a way to maybe take care of it. And then once you've done drinking the milk, you can play.
Yeah, none of these other bottles that I was looking at had any sort of decoration on them. They were all pretty much plain glass. It's definitely, they were ahead of their time there with that idea.
So this goes back. So this is Bronze Age. So we're going 5,000 to 7,000 years back with these bottles, with these clay vessels. So the question is was there anything before that? Like what aspect of society during the Bronze Age may have led to that behavior, or was it a change that was specific to that time? These are they're pretty advanced and nicely made containers, and so is there something more rudimentary that goes further back for some other purpose? I mean, same purpose, but maybe different cultural driving forces.
So you know what else they're reminding me of is the neti pot. They look kind of like a neti pot.
Like mini netties, yeah.
Yeah, and so those are super old neti pots. So I'm just curious because they do use kind of the same gravity-fed principle. They are kind of the same basic rudimentary shape. And they were super old. I'm trying to find exactly how old. It's a part of Ayurvedic medicine. It's pretty.
But I guess at least a couple thousand years for neti pots, but I don't know.
Yeah.
How 10,000 years? What are we? Was it 14? 10, 14 for agriculture? Is that about right? And is that?
And then animal husbandry at the furthest back is what's familiar is maybe 11.
11, yeah. So if you've got goats and cows that have milk at that point in time that you could start feeding your young, were we doing that before then? I don't, Yeah. So I think it's a really interesting kind of the timeline of where these would have originated. That's
something that that they were talking about potentially looking into next, because this was somewhere in Europe, but they found it in Roman Greece. Had elements of this as well. So, it's if you've got a baby, they need to be fed all the time. My mother, if she's got other work to do or other kids to care for, somebody else can step in with one of these. Grandma can go milk a goat into the little baby bottle neti animal figurine thing and take care of business. Right? This is not a new problem.
Go milk a goat, Grandma. It is time for us to move forward. This Week in Science. You know what time it is now?
What time is it?
What time could it be?
It's time for Blair's Animal Corner.
Blair?
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. You want to hear about animals? She's your girl.
except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's animal
What you got, Blair?
Oh my goodness, I have a whole bunch of amazing science news, but first, I have to eat a little crow.
Oh, don't eat a crow on the show live.
It's metaphorical crow. In this case, it's actually I have to eat some gills. So on the September 11th story, so a couple weeks ago, when I was in New Orleans and it was midnight my time, and I don't know what was going on, I was talking about how there were these snakes that were able to do gas exchange through their head, basically breathe through their head. That's still true, but I explained how gills work wrong. And I thank a couple of listeners, Ian and Bert, both reached out to me and let me know that I definitely explained it completely wrong. So I just wanted to real quickly explain how gills work so that loyal listeners of the show will get the complete story. So gills actually work based on a countercurrent of gas exchange. So they pull dissolved oxygen out of the water. They do not cleave water molecules. I don't even know where my brain got that from in that moment. Live show. But I know I was like, I said what? So anyway, so there's this countercurrent. So you have blood moving in one direction that is deoxygenated, and you have water moving in the opposite direction. And so you are able to have the maximum differential at the far end of that countercurrent, so that it pulls the most amount of oxygen as possible from the water. And so that's why, for example, obviously I knew that it was dissolved oxygen because lungfish and mud skippers, they live in low dissolved oxygen environments, which is why they can duck their head out of the water and breathe air, because they need to get oxygen from a secondary location. If they were cleaving water molecules, that wouldn't be an issue because they'd be surrounded by water. So makes sense. And that's also how the snakes' heads worked in that story. So they were able to take low oxygen concentrated blood, deoxygenated blood, and have it pass across the thin surface of the skin on the top of the head and be able to pull oxygen from that. The part that got me talking about this kind of in the weeds is that Justin was asking, I think, about how if they have watertight skin, how that could possibly work. And the answer is I did some digging and I don't know. So I think that's the next part of this story, is how do they facilitate gas exchange over what is supposed to be an impermeable layer?
Yeah, that wasn't my question. I think that was somebody in the chat room. Mine was, is this because it's so close to the proximity of where?
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Is this a conserved and a reintroduced from a conserved genetic
expansion?
You're right.
Yeah.
So that also is a really great question, and we could talk about this forever. My understanding is that because of what we had talked about a little bit during that time was about fetal development. And the gill arches are a very particular part of fetal development that is conserved throughout vertebrates. And so it would be something that we could very easily watch happen in real time in snakes and see if these gill arches stay right where they are, if they turn into inner ear structures like in some vertebrates, or if they're migrating upward. I'm guessing that that's not the case. I'm guessing that those gill arches stay exactly where they are. And so in terms of at least the scaffolding structures, they would most likely have nothing to do with it. But in terms of genetic coding for development, that might be something worth looking at. And you're right, because it is so close. There could be something very interesting going on there.
Yeah, I mean, it would to me, it's harder work to reinvent the same process in pretty much the same location,
right?
By starting from scratch.
However, if I can just say one last thing about that, this basic principle is at work in a lot of different areas of nature. For example, how penguin feet work, how their feet don't freeze and fall off when they're standing in the snow and the ice, is all based on this differential
exchange.
countercurrent exchange. Exactly. And so that's also how our kidneys work. So this basic chemical, if you want to call it biochemical process, is pretty consistent throughout evolution. And so I think that is not so difficult of a jump, especially since what makes gills are these little almost hair-like structures to increase surface area, and we don't have that on the snake's head. So
it's just like a venous. That's just the veins, the capillaries are thin, and they're able to pick up this diffused oxygen in the water.
So nice. I'm glad we could clear that up.
All clear.
And please, everyone, feel free, be nice about it, but feel free to let me know if I have a moment on the show. The show's live and things come out of our mouths sometimes that aren't quite right. It's hard to be
happens to all of us
all the time. Okay, so moving on. I have a couple of really cool stories about invasive species, and they're actually good news stories. Continuing on that good news thread from earlier. So I think we've talked on the show before about cane toads. Cane toads are wreaking havoc all over the planet. A few places in particular, Australia, Hawaii, Florida. So cane toads have been introduced in a few different places, and they're originally from Central America and South America, and they were brought in to eat some bugs that were on the sugarcane, hence cane toad, right? And so they were brought in and they went on to eat everything but the locust that they were brought in to eat. So basically this was a situation. This is basically the like textbook example of introduced species gone wrong. This animal is awake at a different time of day than the bug that they were brought in to eat. How's that going to work? They can eat mice and lizards and other amphibians because they're so big. They can grow to be like 8 inches big. And so these animals have completely gone wild. The other reason they've gone wild is that they have a poison gland, a parotid gland that releases a very particular toxin that can kill animals. It can paralyze them or kill them. And so that in even small doses can kill potential predators, which means if you're not a predator that has grown up around cane toads, that has evolved around cane toads and has some sort of method for getting around or surviving that toxin, there's no control on their population.
And there are such things that exist. Yes, there are things that can eat a cane toad just fine from where it originated.
Yes. Yeah, but where it originated, just not everywhere else.
So we need to introduce those everywhere else.
You'll run into trouble there, but I do have some good news. Remember I said, so this is from Australia, and this was a group of researchers who were looking through a very particular area. So cane toads were introduced in around 1935 to Australia, and they've been spreading through the country at about 60 kilometers a year, leaving devastation in their wake. They have all sorts of animals that have been dying en masse from trying to eat them, like northern quolls, yellow spotted monitors, crocodiles. All these animals have been dying off from trying to eat cane toads, which is a pretty big problem. And then in around 2011, 2012, they arrived to a very particular field site in Western Australia where they were seeing similar crashes in populations of lizards and quolls. And there were researchers there that were kind of trying to monitor the decline of these species. And in 2014, they found a creek dotted with the bodies of cane toads, just cane toads everywhere, that had been attacked. Every morning, there were up to 5 new dead toads, and all of them had a near identical incision right down their chest in a 5-meter stretch of this creek. So they had this small incision, but only in this one very small area of this habitat. So was it a bunch of high school students
doing? Is it an entrance wound or an exit wound?
Yeah, right.
Good question. So they did post-mortem analysis on all of these toads, and they found that the heart and liver had been removed, in addition to the gallbladder, which has toxic bile salts in it. The gallbladder had been moved outside of the chest cavity. So it was just kind of been moved off to the side, but the heart
But
and
not
liver
eaten.
were gone, but not eaten.
Yeah.
In the medium-sized toads, so that was just the large toads. The medium-sized toads, their heart and liver is removed, and one or both of their back legs had been stripped of toxic skin, and the muscle had been eaten underneath it.
This is like a weird serial killer.
Yeah,
cane
it's like
toad.
an episode of CSI, right?
Right. We need I need bones on the case. Come on.
Yeah. They need to check out the blood splatter pattern and stuff. Right? So
Yeah.
the finding brought them to, aside from doing all this post-mortem on the toads, these researchers set up remote infrared cameras, as you do, and they found the native water rat. So then Australia's water rats, or Racali, are one of Australia's beautiful but lesser known native rats. And they have found a way to eat these toxic
Because
angels.
rats can learn. They can learn and they can communicate and pass on that knowledge, which is why sometimes mousetraps just stop working on them.
Yes, and this is where the hope of this story comes in, because it's only in this very small stretch of Western Australia that this has happened. But in just 2 years of the cane toad living in this space, they have figured out how to hunt this poisonous toad and to dissect them, eat their hearts and livers, avoid the poisonous skin, avoid the glands. And so they actually have been able to figure out how to eat these things. Now, these water rats are specifically adapted to live in waterways. They have webbed feet, they have soft water-resistant fur. Fun fact, in Australia at one point, there was a thriving water rat fur industry. So just think about that for a minute, that you might have your finest rat fur coat in Australia at some point.
It's Australia. It makes sense.
Yeah, anyway.
It's still post-apocalyptic.
So these guys, these very, very smart rats, have figured out how to get around the poisonous nature of these toads. During the study, they captured and measured more than 1,800 cane toads in 15 days. So first think about that. 94% of these toads were medium-sized, 3.5% were small, and just 2.5% were large. So the medium toads are more common, but 3/4 of the dead toads were large.
The rats like to kill the big ones.
Yes. No small toads were found or observed being attacked. So the small toads were not worth their time for all that work, right? They were only going for mostly large and some medium toads. So they're not sure how the rats learned so rapidly how to safely attack and eat cane toads. One of their theories is that they have some other similar hunting strategy that they've used on other animals in the area that they now have been able to easily adjust to eat the toxic native frogs, but they are just not sure yet. So
they're underestimating the rat's ability to learn and share knowledge. I mean, this is a rat thing across the
right. But I'm just thinking. So there's so many steps of learning that has to happen here. You have to go, oh, those toads are poisonous. Don't eat them. Larry died. Okay. Oh, those toads are poisonous, but only on their back and behind their eyes. Glenn died when he ate that part, but Susan didn't when she ate the legs. Yeah. And then, the heart and the liver is the best part, right? So,
and if we skin it, the muscle's just fine.
Yeah. So I think there's so many steps there. It's possible. Rats are very, very smart, but it would be a much easier jump in just a 2-year turnaround if that was the situation. So the really exciting part about this, though, is that, as Justin mentioned, they can pass on hunting strategies, and they care for their offspring for a really long time. For rats, about 4 weeks after they finish producing milk, the babies stick around and hang out with mom and dad. So this could help them spread knowledge. So they say, if these tactics spread, water rats might be able to help suppress toad populations. What I'm thinking is, you take some surrogate moms and dads and you place them in other places where these water rats naturally live after they've shown this hunting strategy so that they can teach it to other groups of rats.
Yeah, the really tricky part is, you need to make them foster parents for non-water rats.
Yes.
So that they can. That's tricky. That's tricky. But that would help. Yeah.
I mean, so in Australia, they also have this other thing going on. Actually, it might have been New Zealand, where it's got to be Australia because it's the cane toads. They have been trying to teach wild quolls and other marsupials to stay away from the cane toads. So they've been
don't touch them.
Yeah, they've been using negative reinforcement to try to give them some sort of adverse reaction, a loud sound or something like that. Or actually, I think the most common one is flicking them with a rubber band. So really, people, to save animals, are hitting them with rubber bands to scare them away from toads. So
that makes perfect
this
sense.
seems like a much better version of that. But it's still very exciting.
It's good conditioning.
Yeah, absolutely. And then my last story for the corner tonight is about robots helping invasive species. So this is coming out of NYU, and mosquito fish, which are invasive species worldwide. So there are still some places where they're supposed to be, but there are a lot of places where they're not supposed to be. And they have been shown to show fear responses and stress responses when you put them in a space with a robot version of a largemouth bass.
All right.
Yeah. And so they've actually made a version of this robot that can kind of learn and adjust their tactics of chasing these mosquito fish around over time. And the more realistic their behaviors are to the original largemouth bass, the more stressed out the mosquito fish appear. The more stressed out they are, the lower their body weight, the less successful their reproduction efforts are. And in theory, that could help the population, reduce the population of this invasive species. The one thing they don't mention, though, in this article, I will bring up, what if anybody else who's native gets scared by these robotic largemouth bass, that their entire job is to scare you? Just a thought.
Right. How does it? Yeah. It's not going to be a laboratory situation if you're taking them out into the wild, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's all well and good for the mosquito fish, but to scare them away. But for a fake animal that, a predator is scary because it's hungry. It doesn't hunt all the time. And so if you throw a robot in there that's acting like it's hunting all the time, that could really stress out animal populations that are not your intended target as well.
And aren't there other, there have got to be better solutions for the mosquito fish than scary largemouth bass.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or is this something like, are rivers so undiverse? We have in cities, to get rid of the crows, the hawk that they fly around town to scare the crows away so that they don't roost over the cars and do all that kind of stuff. So we do this kind of naturally without robots in some situations, and it seems to work very well. So I don't know, it could work, but what? Robots?
Yeah, well, and plus you have to deal with the really angry fishermen, fisherwomen, who accidentally pull up a robotic largemouth bass.
You'd hope that would not happen.
Can't eat that for dinner.
This robot's not going to cook up well.
No.
Might as well go have some tea.
Tea?
Well, if you're British, maybe you'll have a cuppa. The cup of tea, researchers just have reported finding microscopic plastic particles in tea, according to the American Chemical Society's Environmental Science and Technology. Researchers looked at these newfangled bags that are, you could buy a tea and there's like the silky bags, and they're not necessarily silk. They're usually a kind of plastic, actually.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And so using electron microscopy, the team found that at brewing temperature, a single plastic bag released about 11.6 billion microplastic particles and 3.1 billion nanoplastic particles into the water. This is really high, thousands of times higher than other reports for different kinds of food. They treated water fleas, Daphnia magna, with the plasticky nanoparticle and microparticle water. And the animals survived, but they did have some abnormalities. I guess they weren't exactly normal. So we don't know how this would affect you health-wise. We don't know how the plastics actually affect people. There's no sense whether or not they do at all. But if you're using tea bags, no, you might use a metal spoon and make your own tea, or buy tea with a paper bag.
Yeah, can we just stop putting plastic on food items that don't need them?
Especially food items that are going to be just sunk into extremely hot water, which is a recipe for the breakdown of a substance and the release of particles. I mean, it's just like anyway.
So really, anytime you put it into something that's got plastics into solution of water, you're going to run into this problem.
Pretty much. I mean, or hot water, if you're putting,
it doesn't necessarily need to be
or the
hot
microwave, or I mean, there are all sorts of.
Or your laundry.
Or your laundry,
And it turns out it's not necessarily water temperature, and it's not necessarily agitation within a wash cycle. In fact, it's the volume of water used and the duration that makes a bigger impact. According to recent research done on the delicate wash cycle in your washing machine by researchers at Newcastle University, they show that the delicate cycle, which tends to use less agitation and more water in the wash cycle to protect the clothes from getting agitated or scraped by the agitation in any way, actually releases more microfibers than a standard cycle simply because of the volume of the water.
Wow.
So, this is going to keep coming up over and over and over again, that we need to stop putting plastic in things that get in contact with water. And I think that's going to essentially be the thing. If there's water involved, plastic can no longer be. Water bottles, no. Sippy cup. I mean, we had to remove bisphenol A from all of these things at some point because they were also leaching out. Plastics, anything in the plastics in connection to water combination, it's going to leach out. And the other thing about that too is the more water that we use is also a bad thing. So using less water, this is kind of a nice aspect of this. Using less water will release less microplastics from our fibers. So you might consider one of these front load washing machines that uses reduced water in the first place and has no agitator. So if we're using less water, there'll be less microplastics into the environment that way as well. This is just another place that we have to look at how all these microplastics are ending up in the ocean.
So many places. What about ways that wasps end up taken in as victims? Last quick story from me for the 2 hours, is a story about crypt keeper wasps. These are wasps that they take they're pretty awesome. They create the galls on oak trees. Mm-hmm. So they will, a wasp, Euderus set, will take the gall that has been created by other species of wasps. So another, like a common victim is known as the Bassetia pallida wasps. And so they lay their eggs in the stems and branches of the oak trees, and you get the swollen bumps and the galls. And so the crypt keeper wasp comes in, digs in, lays her eggs in the gall with the other wasp's eggs. The larvae camp out there next to the hatchlings that are there and burrow into their bodies. And when the hatchling of the the prey species, the victim, is ready to chew its way out and get out of the gall, the crypt keeper somehow, and they don't know how the crypt keeper does it, but the crypt keeper makes the host chew a hole in the gall that's too small for them to get out, so their head gets stuck. And they're stuck. And then they're not going anywhere, so they become food for the larva for the crypt keeper wasp. And so then when the crypt keeper wasp larvae are grown and they want to leave the gall, well, of course, they just chew right out through the host's head because that's the easiest exit point. It's softer than eating out through bark of a tree. Cool. So anyway, the new news here is that researchers publishing in Biology Letters, they looked at 23,000 galls, and they found that they contained over 100 different species of oak gall wasps. And they found that the crypt keepers were parasitizing 6 different species of wasps. And so they parasitized out of these 23,000 galls, 305 wasps from these 6 different species. So they don't focus, the crypt keepers don't focus on one species of these gall-producing wasps. They're not picky. They are pretty much just gonna, there's a gall, I'm gonna put my larva in there.
Yeah, which means their mind control compounds are pretty broad.
Broad, exactly, and not specific. The one thing that they don't like in a gall are galls that are covered in fur or spikes.
Good reason to get that rat fur coat from Australia.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Oh, wasps with galls. Put a little rat fur coat on there. Avoid your crypt keepers. Last story, Blair?
Yes, your cat likes you. So many people.
What?
So many people sent this story to me, and I just love it that somebody decided at Oregon State University to use their secure base test, which is a space where they have humans and cats interacting with each other in a spatial environment and seeing their response to one another. They had all these behavioral scientists studying it as it was happening. They did the same test that they've done in the past with dogs, who everyone assumes is very connected to their owner, right? And with infants, definitely connected to their parent. I did not say owner.
It was close, right?
Well, anyway, the thing is, you're measuring for 2 different categories of responses out of kittens or dogs or infants, securely attached or insecurely attached. And the ratio of secure attachment, around 65%, to insecure attachment, approximately 35%, was consistent among cats, dogs, and infants, which means your cat is just as likely to be attached to you as a dog or a child is.
Duh.
Yeah. Duh, for sure.
Duh.
Yeah, but with the leverage behind it of you're their source of food. Now, for the dog.
For a dog also, for a child also, it's all...
Wait. For a child, I think
social structure is important. We're just gonna...
Yes. I think for dogs and infants, the social structure is a very important compound to this.
My cat likes me for more than just food.
It's purely strategic.
Well, so the problem with that, though, Justin, is that
so
many cats are grazers and they just have food out all the time, which means they don't need a pet from you to get their food. In fact, in some cases, dogs are more dependent on coming to you and seeking attention in order to get a treat or their dinner. And so cats, in some ways, have less food-based motivation to seek out interaction with you than dogs do. So
I think just marking their territory.
My cats love me. My cats, I will be down here in the basement, and the cats, I will hear them go, meow, 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 and they come running down the stairs, meow, 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 and they have this little meowy sound. No, and they come down, and they've got a little toy mouse in their mouth, and then they drop it at my feet, and they go, meow, meow, and they meow at me, and then they get pets. And
Yeah, and so Justin,
they brought
just
me
to
a dead
clarify-
mouse. They're helping me.
That means they love you. So
they love me.
last little bit of clarification, just because I know Justin wants to hear some hard science here, is that this is a real behavioral measurement of whether they are using a human as a source of security in a situation that they are unfamiliar in. And so in the grand majority of cats, in this case, the same percentage as infants and dogs, the cats showed behavior that their owner was a source of security for them. So they tested their behavior in this room, first both of them going in together, the cat being left alone for a while, and then the human coming back. And based on that interaction specifically, they felt that they could measure that there was this secure relationship between the cat and the human.
I have a secure relationship with my cats. That's all I need to know. That's all I need to know. And you know what? That's all we all need to know this week. Well, that's not true. There's so much more to know. I hope these stories tonight led you to ask more questions, and maybe you're going to go look something up. Maybe you're already looking something up because of our conversations tonight, because of the stories that we had. Thank you for joining us this evening. We have come to the end of another show. And now I would love to give shout outs to our wonderful volunteers who help us out. Identity 4 for recording the show. Thank you so much. Gord McLeod in the chat room. Thank you. Thada for helping us with the show notes and the show descriptions and the social media. Thank you for all these things. And thank you to our Patreon sponsors. Thank you to Paul Disney, Andrew Swanson, Craig Landon, Andy Groh, Ed Stu Pollock, Philip Shane, Ken Hayes, Harrison Prather, Charlene Henry, Joshua Fury, Steve DeBell, Alex Wilson, Tony Steele, Richard Porter, Mark Mazzaros, Jack, Matthew Litwin, Jason Roberts, Bill K, Bob Calder, Time Jumper 319, Eric Knapp, Richard Brian Condren, Dave Neighbor, Donald Mundis, Sarah Forfar, Dan K, Matt Bass, Darwin Hannon, Patrick Pecoraro, Ben Bignell, Jean Tellier, John Gridley, Corinne Benton, Adam LaJoy, Sarah Chavis, Rodney, Tiffany Boyd, John Bertram, Mountain Sloth, Seth O'Gradney, Stephen Albaron, John Ratnaswamy, Dave Friedel, Daryl Myshak, Paul Ronovich, Sue Doster, Dave Wilkinson, Noodles, Kevin Reardon, Christoph Zucknarek, Ashish Pants, Ulysses Adkins, Artyom, Rick Ramus, Paul, John McKee, Jason Olds, Brian Carrington, Christopher Dreyer, Lisa Suzuki, Jim Drapode, Greg Riley, Sean Lamb, Steve Leisman, Kurt Larson, Randy Garcia, Rudy Garcia, Marjorie, Gary S., Robert, Greg Briggs, Merida Minish, Christopher Rappin, Flying Out, Aaron Luthen, Matt Sutter, Mark Hestenflow, Kevin Parachan, Byron Lee, and E.O. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. If you are interested in supporting us, you can find information at patreon.com/thisweekinscience. Click the Patreon link at twist.org. Remember, you can help TWIS out by telling your friends about us. On next week's show, we will be back once again with more science news for you, broadcasting live online at 8 p.m. Pacific Time, twist.org/live. You can watch and join our chat room, but don't worry if you can't make it. You can find past episodes on YouTube or there at twist.org.
Thank you for enjoying the show. TWIS is also available as a podcast. Just Google This Week in Science anywhere in your iTunes type device, and it should pop right up. Or in anywhere, Apple Marketplace. Apple's got us covered.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes will be available on our website. That's at www.twist.org, where you can also make comments and start conversations with the hosts and other listeners.
Yes. Or you can contact us directly. Email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or Blair at blairbaz@twist.org. Just be sure to put TWIS somewhere in the subject line. Otherwise, your email will be, what is it, Blair?
Spam filtered into oblivion.
You can also hit us up on Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jackson Fly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes through in the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This
in science. This week in science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer and it shouldn't be news. That what I say may not represent your views. But I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. Jeopardy. And This Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address. From stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought. And I'll try to answer any question you've got. So how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say. And if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.